This is the window in front of my kitchen sink. It has the curtain rod all ready to go, but it doesn't have a curtain. I'm going to show you how to make a very simple curtain. I'm going to use as the majority of the piece this fabric that I got, as I usually do, at the Austin Creative Reuse Center. You can search for creative reuse centers across the country online, and it's not quite long enough, so I'll be adding a piece on one end to make it longer. I have a few options laid out here for myself, and currently I think that I'm most likely going to go with this one. It's possible I'll go with the darker one, but I really loved the way this looks. It's maps and elephants and animal print, and I think it goes really well with the colors in my kitchen. I think you can agree it works, right? Let's get to the sewing machine. Before I get to the sewing machine, I'm going to need to get to the ironing board. This material was a little wrinkled, and to make sure that I have straight edges, I want to iron it. I'm going to iron it on high heat. If you're using cotton, you can do high heat. Be careful if you're using polyester. It's better to test out on a scrap piece that you kind of half melt than it is to accidentally melt the piece you want to use. I have taken measurements of the window and the fabric. They're nearly identical, which means the fabric's going to be too short because I need to have a seam. That is why I'll be adding additional fabric. I'm fairly sure I know which fabric I'm going to use. I think you can agree. The fabrics that I have to go with it. So this is, it has Sudan and Africa and some animal prints, elephants. It's really gorgeous, and it's fairly sheer. Fairly, I say. Maybe that's the wrong word. It's not sheer, but it's gonna, oh, hi. It's going to allow a lot of the light in, and I think you can agree, looking at the marble countertop behind me, this really goes with the kitchen. It's gonna bring the whole room together, like the rug in The Big Lebowski. I'm not positive if I'm going to add a ruffle to the top or bottom, but I believe at this point what I'm going to do is add a channel for the curtain rod at the top, and I may add a piece to the bottom. I have some lace. We're going to see about that. But while I'm not entirely positive which fabric I'm going to use, I suspect it's going to be this. It is an animal print, which is in keeping with the theme of the material I'm using. It's possible, if I'm going to do something on the bottom, that I'm going to use this. It's gray and black and flowered. When you're creating something, it's good to keep in mind that light draws the eye, and that typically you're going to want darker colors to be lower. If you think of a beautiful vista, you think of a sunset, you think of a great view, the bottom, the ground, is darker in almost every scenario. The sky is lighter. So it's something that humans naturally find to be more attractive, is if the darker colors are on the bottom and the lighter colors are on top. So I try to follow that rule without a whole lot of exception. You do you, though. You do you. Part of why I'm including showing me ironing is because it's a really important part of sewing, especially if patience is a challenge for you. Then you may want to skip this step, but you should work on changing what you want, because it is such an important part of sewing and getting a seam right. It's not the most interesting thing that ever happened to the world, but it does matter, and it really affects the outcome of what you're going to end up with. So much time is saved in ironing, even though it can feel like it is tedious. And I know that it's tedious. I spent a lot of my younger years trying to avoid ironing, and admittedly still want to often avoid ironing. In this project, it was easy to be tempted not to use the iron because I wanted the project to be as simple as possible. But I know that if we don't iron on the front end, then we risk irregularities throughout, which can really damage the final product. And since I'm already doing something that's very simple, let's do it simply but correct enough that it'll be a nice curtain at the end. I think ironing, especially in this case, helped me make sure that the fabric was square. I am going to be ironing the entire piece so that just so that it's flat, then I'll be able to cut it as you see to make sure that it is even across the bottom. That's going to be relevant to the final look of it. And then I'm going to go back and on either the top and the bottom side, on both, I'll be folding it over and adding maybe half an inch, quarter to a half an inch. Doing this instead of trying to do it just by myself on the machine is going to save time in the long run and also make it so how well the symmetry of the seam, is that the word that I'm looking for? The distance between the edge of the fabric and the beginning of the thread will be more uniform and consistent throughout, which is going to make it look like a piece that was done with care and consideration instead of the fairly obvious sense of whimsy with which I approached it and kind of a fun around and find out thing that I did. But ironing the seams in this case is important. I ironed the entire piece of fabric so that it. Oh, I'm shaky. Stop shaking. Camera. That worked, I'm sure. I've ironed the main piece of fabric that'll be my curtain, and just to flatten that area out, I've also cut it to make sure that it is squared off evenly, fairly evenly. Then I have ironed the edges at the top and the bottom here. I've ironed in quarter to a half of an inch. That's what I'm gonna do a seam along so that the fraying will cease. I am using the Singer Classic. It's a great sewing machine for me. Sewing machines are built to last. So if you have your grandmother's sewing machine and you get it serviced, then you don't need a brand new sewing machine. You really don't. There are some one of the tricks that I have used is I go to the fabric store and find an elder and ask them to help me learn how to thread my machine. If you want to get fantastic instruction from someone that knows what they're doing and maybe provide them with some nostalgia of the machine that they had when they were younger, then find an elder at the sewing machine store, or just one of the employees would be able to show you too. But it's way more fun to have someone in their 80s explain how to do it and have them be happy to. Okay, so I'm just going to do one line. This is just to prevent the fraying, so I'll be doing a zigzag style stitch. I didn't test this in advance to make sure that my tension levels are right. I'm going to increase my tension a little. I am at a zigzag stitch on length number 3, width number 2, and tension number 4. What's going to work for you is going to vary based on your machine, based on your fabric, based on, I don't know, humidity. No, it's not based on humidity. But there are variables that I can't account for, so I can't tell you which of those things you want to do with your machine. And here we go. It's looking good so far. If you can see it, maybe I need to go a little further before I can show you. It's trying to focus on me. Focus on, there we go. And it looks just fine. It's not a store-bought look to do the zigzag stitch, but it's part of what I love about it. And it works very well. That'll stop the fraying. When you buy fabric, you'll find on the edges sometimes, the selvage edge, this is the part that is pre-frayed, we could say. It's not going to continue to fray beyond that. So if you want to fold it in on itself, and maybe fold it in on itself a couple of times to hide the fray, you can do that. My initial plan is just to fold it in once, and I'll change it to a straight stitch, I think. I'm going to go to the other end before I make that decision. The other end of the fabric I have also ironed in advance to make doing that zigzag stitch to prevent further fraying even easier. You can see that it's already starting to fray, and it's been minutes since I cut it. So we'll want to get that zigzagged ASAP. I think this is going to be lovely, especially for such a small project. I think I'm going to be happy with it. I'm normally working on furniture, but I had COVID, super tired from that, and then I got pneumonia, super tired from that. I'm right at energetic enough to do something, but not refinish furniture. Okay. Guide the fabric, don't force it. Same as before. That'll stop the fray. If this was a piece of clothing, how far apart these stitches are might not really be sufficient. Because it's a curtain that's not going to get moved around a great deal, this zigzag stitch should save it from fraying, and it won't have any weight on the stitch. So it's okay for it to be further apart and for it to be just as imperfect as it is. Actually, I think that looks going to be pretty good for the curtain. On the fabric, Africa is spelled with a K, and I don't know offhand, but I think in Africa it's spelled with a K, and that the English spell it with a C, so therefore the United Statesians spell it with a C. I'm curious, what are you doing, Canada? And also, I probably should look it up and see if that's right. I don't know where I think I have that knowledge from, but I think I do. The sides, I do believe, need a stitch. This is too unfinished looking, but I'm not going to cut it because when you see these are not going to fray on you. They're already frayed, but they're not going to fray further than they already have. You can see it. I can pull on it and it's not going to keep going, whereas that, well, I just did a little bit. So it's not, but it's not. So I do want to fold it in so it'll be on the exterior facing side of the curtain. You won't see anything other than the shadow of it, likely. Then we'll do measurements again to see how much more length we're going to need for this curtain not to look bad. I'm folding the corner here. Camera really wants to focus on my face. All right. Okay, so I'm folding the corner in before I fold the edge over, so it'll be, you can see the corner there. Otherwise, if I didn't fold it in and I just folded it right over, some of the fray would likely show on the edge, which wouldn't be the end of the world. So if you are doing this and forget to do that part, be easy on yourself about it. Sewing takes so much patience, and it's not something that I believe I'm particularly good at compared to plenty of people. But as I've said before, what I learned best, I learned by teaching. And so for me, this is very helpful. If you see errors in my ways or have commentary and experience that is beyond mine, which is often very likely, most people do, then please feel free to correct me where I'm wrong. I'd be grateful for it. And then at the end, I'm going to fold in the corner again so that that frayed edge won't show on the other side. And I backstitch to ensure that it stays put. My machine comes with this. It's super useful if you can find one to glue on or Velcro on. I don't even know if they have those. I would if I were you. It's one of my favorite things about the machine, if not my favorite thing about the machine, which seems like a minor enough accessory, but it really has saved a lot of time. It's very helpful not to need to reach for scissors every time it's time to trim. I'm sweating, so I went to turn down the AC, but it's only at 75. I guess I should take my temperature. But I've got sewing to do. On this selvage edge, I did not iron it down as I did on the other edge. It's easy enough to fold over, and to be fair, the edge that I did iron would have been fairly easy to fold over, but it's so much better to just iron, especially on the bottom and top. The next piece of fabric that I use is going to need to be next to that, and so the closer I can get it to straight and correct, the better, so that I'm not going slightly deviating from correct in every piece. In quilting, I think it becomes more important that you be careful with your measurements, and it's part of why projects like this are so much fun, because you can make a lot of mistakes and still have a lovely end result. Now I have every one of the 4 edges sewn with the zigzag stitch, so from the side that you'll see, it'll look finished. And now I need to measure again to see how long the curtain is, how much is lacking, and make a decision on how I'm going to proceed. I think a channel at the top in the animal print that's lighter is what I'm going to go with. Maybe I'll change my mind in a minute. My suspicion about what I want to do has been confirmed. I'm going to add a channel at the top. By the way, if you really love this fabric, it is called Alexandria by Ann Fishkin for Red Rooster Fabrics, and the DSN is 24790. You can maybe find it at redroosterfabrics.com. I don't know how old this is, so that might not be true, and there's no info on this fabric for me to give to you. I took a measurement, and the measurement of the window is exactly the measurement that I have of the fabric, so that means all I need is the channel. I pulled the rod down, and I will just create a channel that's just long enough for that to go in. There are a few different methods I could use. I could do pleats. I could have the rod channel be the length of the window and pleat the fabric and then pin it, or I could have it be the length of the window and scrunch the fabric and pin it. Because I'm doing the simplest possible option, I'm going to make both fabrics the same length and then have them both scrunch up over the curtain rod. Time to cut this. I think that'll be good. And I'll likely want 2 lengths of fabric so that I have a channel that's as long as my other piece of fabric. I'll see in just a moment. Again, not going for perfection. The seams are going to be facing out, so what we will see will look good without being perfect. Folding this in half lengthwise will let me know how much more I need. Looks like it's going to be approximately half the length of one cut. If that made sense to you, cool. If it didn't, that's okay. Quite imperfect, which is perfect. By folding it in on itself like that, I can get a better, I can make it a little more square. Just a little. My former mother-in-law bought me these scissors like 15 years ago, I think. Best pair of scissors I've ever had. They are starting to get well, is that true? Maybe I purchased these myself. Anyway, they're wonderful. The ones she got me lasted for years. And perhaps these are them. They're Fiskars. It's probably about time to get them sharpened though. This channel is going to be super simple. I'm just going to fold it in half. And then I'm going to sew it onto, I'm going to sew the curtain panel onto the front of it to, is that true? Oh, let me burn that bridge when I get to it. Let's see. That'll be a bit longer than I need for it to be, which I think is erring on the side of caution. Now these two pieces I will sew together. I'll face them right sides together, then I'll sew a line, and when I open them, they'll be like that. I will be adjusting my machine so that I have a straight stitch before I piece these two together, because I do want that seam to be more strong than the zigzag that I've been using just to make sure the tension holds. By the way, if you use the zigzag stitch and have the length on 0, you're going to get a straight stitch. Not that I've ever made that mistake over and over. Right sides together. Again, I haven't checked the tension. I think it'll be fine. If it's not, I can easily recut another piece. Want to make sure that the needle is up before I lift the foot up and pull the thread out so that I'm not putting undue pressure on the needle. When your needle breaks, and it will break, try to have a backup one on hand. I mean, eventually it will break, not necessarily in this project specifically. Needles break, concrete cracks, the world turns. All right. If I wanted to be super fancy, I could open this up and I could steam open the seam here, but I'm not, this is a super casual project that I'm doing, just as simply as possible. But if you wanted to be a bit more perfect, you could steam open that seam. When I roll over it with the needle, it might bunch in a little bit of a weird way, but the curtain is going to be bunching anyway. So I am okay with that. A couple of ways I could do this. I could pin it to the curtain as is and then sew, or I could sew the channel and then attach the curtain, which I think is what I'm going to do because that's the easiest thing to do. I'm just going to double check to make sure the rod will fit through it. It will. Though I didn't steam down the seams, I am going to finger press them apart. And then when I get to them, it'll be nearly as effective as if I steam them, or just as effective, I don't know. If you're new to sewing or new to having patience, practice going slowly here, because it's just easy to make a mistake as you learn how your sewing machine works. Practice going slow. I say, and then put the pedal to the floor. It likely would have been wiser for me to sew these parts in rather than what I'm doing, which is kind of folding them in, and then I can just barely get them to stay that way by working my needle into it to hold down one piece. It's fine. Not perfect. Trying not to be perfect. Now, here's a channel. I think it's the right approximate length. I will find out now. My intention is going to be to do a straight stitch so that this frayed part here will be in the back, and the part that will be facing me so it, no, that was a silly idea. Mistaken. I'm going to do right sides together, and I will pin to make sure that I have the right length for the channel. Right after, I check again to make sure that the rod goes through. That'll also help me know how much space I have, wiggle room to make a mistake. Still goes in, and it gives me about 1/2 inch. And in keeping with the theme of doing the easiest possible way, I'm actually not going to pin it. I will start with one end correctly, and then as I get toward the other end, I'll stop and trim as needed. So, right sides together, so that when it is finished being sewn, that's what you will see at the seam. On the back, we've got a lot of junk happening. That's the official term for it, junk. I think with the possible exception of fabric, or possible exception of paint, nothing can really change the look of a room quite like fabric can. It does so much. If you can hear my sewing, not my sewing, if you can hear my dryer in the background, if you would let me know, I will make sure not to record audio while I'm doing laundry, or at least I'll apologize for it when I do. I'm going to let the bottom piece overlap a little bit so that I can see both edges as I'm doing this. Normally I would have them be directly up against each other, but it's not necessary, and it'll be easier to make sure that I don't have the zigzag seam showing if I move the main piece a little closer to have it jut out a bit over here. I'll also be doing my line just above the previous seam line that I did. I didn't have to make the channel before I attached it to the curtain, but I felt like having two pieces that I'm holding together, and I could have, well, this seems the easiest to me. It's neat in sewing how many, like, or what you could do. Options abound. Both of these being pattern pieces also allows room for error, just like having pattern clothing allows room for stains not to show. And now that I'm getting toward the edge, I can see that I have about 1/2 inch of the animal print. So I will fold it in on itself after I trim some of this excess. Got a lot going on here. I will fold it in on itself so that it's not frayed rather than cut it until it meets the edge of the curtain better than it had been. Okay, that should be as imperfect as I want it. I don't know if you have to have a goal of imperfection, but I certainly do. The last time I was in school, my daughter held me accountable for trying to be a B student. That was my goal. I didn't like it, but I was a B student. Because I would spend so many extra hours trying to get that A when it just wasn't really going to matter. I had the whole rest of my life to be participating in. Did the back stitch. At the end here, I will trim the excess. I look forward to seeing how well these hold up because I did it as simply as possibly. So I am look forward to see where there's failure. So this was as I put it together, and so that's where I sewed. That's my seam line with the correct pieces together, correct sides facing each other. And then now that it's sewn, when I open it, you can see that it's got a professional finish to the edge. And out of curiosity, I'm not going to go back and change it, but I'm going to see if I have any of the seam lines showing from the zigzag that I did on the main panel or the connection of the tube that I did, and I don't have any seam line showing that I didn't want showing. Time to try it out. I wish the sun was still out enough for me to see how much light's going to get through, and I'd be able to see where the seams may show more than I want, but that's okay. Tomorrow exists. I can see it tomorrow. The channel is large enough, but fitting it through, it's just kind of getting stuck on this painted dowel is all. Okay. Let's see. Then I'm going to fall into the sink. So this edge is stationary. I want to put the dowel in here first, and then this other side has a space. That's what I wanted. Now I have what I wanted. I might go back and add lace down here. Or as I said, the darker at the bottom to kind of anchor it. And also when the light comes through, it's just above the windowsill, which is fine, especially in a kitchen, so that I can get to the windowsill to clean it. I don't want to get the fabric wet and then, well, I just don't want to get the fabric wet and not have it be air drying. So that's fine, but I might want to do a piece of black lace underneath. I don't want to weigh it down too much, though I don't think that's going to be an issue. I'll be surprised if I ever take this curtain down again. Isn't it imperfect? Don't you just love it? Ta-da!